I've hosted over 300,000 tourist days across my Airbnbs, and that experience is exactly why I won't do it anymore. In this video, I'm going to explain what type of properties to buy or rent if you want stable mid to long term contractor bookings without the chaos that comes with tourist hosting. So, first and foremost, it goes without saying that the property needs to be in a location where there is contractor demand. Now, there's many ways that you can do this, but as a high level overview, if you have a city that has a population of probably 300,000 or more, if you have universities, hospitals, or multiple universities and multiple hospitals, even better, obviously plenty of schools and good infrastructure in a city centre, then I think that in itself is just a very basic green light. Yes, this will work. Those towns and cities are always going to be getting developed, and therefore there's always going to be construction work going on where people need accommodation for. Now, the best advice I can give you is that you need to be laying down your roots in 5+ bed houses. All right. That for me has been the golden rule. And I just see, 3 to 4 times more profit from those type of houses. And also there is a huge economies of scale and cost saving for the company booking and also for ourselves, which makes it work. All right. So I'm going to explain that in a bit of detail. So let me just bring up my little iPad here. So if we have, let's say, for example, a 2 bed property, and we are charging, contractors will typically only pay around 30 to 45 pound per night, depending on whether, where you are in the country. But let's just say I'll work on my model, right? So they typically will pay 35 pound per night. So if I've got a 2 bedroom times 35, obviously that's 70 pound per night. Now, for most properties, that will not work financially. Even if you have, 30 nights a month booked, so that's going to be like 2,100. And then obviously you've got your, let's say, mortgage, your bills, you're going to be left with probably somewhere like, if we said mortgage and bills was, let's say 1,400, obviously you're going to be left there with £700 profit, which isn't bad, right? But if you are obviously renting, and therefore your bills probably increase to somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 2,000. All right, you're not actually going to be left with much money, and therefore it's it doesn't work. And this is what I see with a lot of Airbnb hosts. They're like, oh, contractors sounds great, but the money's never enough. We always get bid in the nuts. They don't want to pay much per night. Their budgets are very low, and yes, they are, right, because they typically work on like a Premier Inn will charge them £70 per night per room, and that will be a twin room. So you divide that by 2, and that's how they pretty much derive at their £35 per night, because that's ultimately what they can house their staff for in local kind of budget hotels. So by having a 5 bed times 35, then obviously we massively increase that income to circa £200 per night. Now you times that by 30 nights, and you're starting to look at some very, very, very healthy money. So with 200 by 35 is 6, so that's six grand we've got coming in from £200 a night times 30 nights. Now, where it works for ourselves is the fact that, to operate this 2 bed property, the bills on it are probably somewhere in the region of about £500, including, council tax, turnovers, heat and gas, electricity, all that sort of stuff. Now, the bills to operate this are probably only something like 850. So you're paying an extra like 350 in bills. But as you can see here, the income that's coming in, the 6 grand versus the 2,100 that we projected here, it's far superior. So you're making literally 3 to 4 times more income from running just a larger property. And it just makes so much more sense. I even, I was speaking to one of my one-on-one clients the other day, and they were like, the difference between renting a 4 bed at, let's say, for example, 2,000, and then renting the 5 bed at 2,300, obviously this is a month, is like astronomical, because they were like, oh, I don't want to pay that extra money. And I was like, well, just think about this, right? You've got one extra bedroom. Even if you times by £30 per night, all right, you're getting it full for 30 nights in the month. All right, so 30 times 30 is obviously 900, right? So you're paying 900, you're going to get 900, sorry, for paying an extra 300 in rent. So for me, it was just an absolute no brainer. Like, go for the 5 bed. The economies of scale work in our favor. And this is how you can turn both rent to rent and purchased assets into a very lucrative strategy. But it does come down to having, those larger properties for sure. It's really, really important that you do, focus on acquiring the larger stock. Now, in terms of a few other extras, I do think that they must have parking. Now, it doesn't mean that they've got to have parking on the drive. It means that, it needs to be nearby but easy. All right. So if it's a nightmare to, get permits on the vans or register permits, or they've got to park miles away, then that is going to cause problems. It might not cause problems with the original booking, but what I tend to find from contractors is they'll test the property first. And if it ticks all the boxes in terms of, travel time, the amenities, so on and so forth, then they will look to do, more repeat bookings with you, and ultimately that's how we end up increasing our direct booking game, and also the length of stays that we get from one single guest. So making sure that you secure or acquire a property that has ample parking nearby, easy to get in and out of, then that will 100% work for your property, and it will 100% work against your property if it's not easy. I totally avoid city centers. I think you just don't need to spend the excess money that a city center property will acquire versus something out in the vicinity of the city. And what I've typically found is, even if the projects are in the city center, the contractors don't want to work in the city center. They stay in the city center. Sorry, like they don't, because they don't want the hassle with typically the NCP parking and the hustle and bustle of a city. So I would massively avoid city centers. The next and kind of final thing I want to touch base on is, we having spoke to hundreds and hundreds, thousands of contractors over the years, and at the higher level, their main criteria is 15-minute drive time to site. So this is where you can kind of pitch yourself outside the city centers and capture many of the sites, and having that 15-minute drive time radius does mean that you can put, I've got properties in the most random locations that I was swore blind would not work. We kitted them out. I took a punt, and they've worked really well. Okay. And it is down to that 15-minute drive time. Anything that is, accessible to motorways, massively advantageous. But that is the typical rule that they use. So when you're searching, kind of, you can widen your radius to kind of, that 15-minute drive time. So once you've got a few of these properties in place, fantastic, but then that becomes part of the conversation. In this next video, I'll explain exactly how contractor bookings are structured differently to tourist stays, and why that often results in lower VAT exposure and a stronger net profit for your portfolio.